I guess we can move on to the actual professional aspect. As you are in the US currently, pretty much relate to all your capability of just adapting to all these new environments. But you started off in engineering and now you are the principal at KFC. So, how do you navigate your career?
I'll go one step back as well. I actually started my career as a sergeant in Singapore's fire and rescue organization before moving to the US the second time. And look, as a mechanical engineer, I never thought I'd be working for KFC. Hand on heart, I can say that, but it's been an absolute privilege to not only spend time here at the global level, but also have had the career transitions as well. None of them were thought out from before. Coming to Texas, you naturally think you're going to grow a career in engineering, manufacturing, energy, etc., as well, and that is going to be your career for the rest of the journey. Uh, for me, a lot of it is actually down to the people that you meet and the folks that you interact with who inspire you and who you aspire to be. And I remember when I started out in engineering, people often ask, why did I do engineering? And the honest answer is because my dad told me, which is a very desi answer. But frankly, I had no interest in the technical aspect. In my technical electives will vouch for that if we ever get to that conversation. But I think it was important. And so I listened to my dad, and
Yeah.
looking back, I don't regret it one bit. Also had the privilege of then putting that into practice in industry as well, working for a few different oil and gas companies, chemical companies, and manufacturers, including Tesla. Just so that I did service to the degree and the point that I needed to ground myself in technical skills. And when you're an international student, I think that's really important so that then you can make the pivot. Business was always an interest of mine, how businesses work, how they operate, what executives think about, etc. And it wasn't until I met a couple of mentors of mine that I learned that a company called McKinsey exists. Because when I started in college and beyond, I had never heard of them. I'd never heard of the profession of consulting. And I had then, just in the interest of learning more, spoken to a few folks, many of whom were Pakistani of origin, to whom I'm in touch with, and they're like family now. But also just thinking through what makes an engineer so effective in the consulting world. And you think about the analytical problem solving skills, breaking down complex problems, and then you marry that with a little bit of industry experience. And then it makes you very relevant for a client to help them solve through their challenges. So, look at McKinsey. I spent a lot of time around corporate strategy, digital strategy, customer experience, and tech transformation, and in a variety of industries, including energy, core tech, so think software companies, and then also in the food and beverage space. And for me, I always thought of McKinsey, or the way McKinsey was advertised to me was it was a launching pad or a career accelerator. And the amount of learning that I had in my few years there was absolutely tremendous. It's funny because I had tried to get into McKinsey, I think 3, 4 times over a number of years. And for whatever reason, unfortunately, couldn't even make the interview round. And then here comes the last time where I didn't tell anybody that I was applying. And much to my surprise, just because it was out of habit, not only do I receive an invitation to move forward, but I receive an invite and I actually have 5 days to prepare. If you're familiar with the consulting world, casing is a big part of the interview process. And a lot of the relationships that I had developed previously, I had to call them up and say, hey, I didn't tell you that I applied this year, but I did. And my interview is in 5 days. And would you be willing to run a case with me? And it was probably the most stressful week at the time in my life where I was trying to be ready for what seemed like a really hard interview. So, had the support from not only the overseas Pakistani community in consulting, but others who I had the privilege of chatting with and who were kind enough to mentor me as well. And so the iterative improvement around each of my cases over those 5 days was thankfully enough to sneak through and successfully interview and land a job offer. So even the journey to get there is certainly one that is memorable for me. But the learning was absolutely tremendous. Serving clients on these topics across industries, you learn so much, not only from a functional standpoint, but also across industries to think about what are the right questions to ask? How do you find the balance between vulnerability and credibility to ask the right questions about a new industry, but also show that you have what it takes to not only help your clients succeed, but also grow talent and capabilities internally and externally as well. And a lot of it, even across consulting and the transition to consulting as well, is really around relationships and mentorship. So I hand on heart, I can say that I wouldn't be at KFC today or at McKinsey or have had the engineering experiences that I did if it wasn't for the relationships and the mentors who were kind enough to extend their time, their insight, their wisdom my way. And I think it starts off with family. I think obviously now I would consider my father a mentor because, and I'm glad I took his advice for starting engineering, but just taking that thread and continuing it on with other folks that you learn from as well. And then look, the story from McKinsey to KFC is the same thing. McKinsey touts itself on its alumni network. And I was actually really curious to see, all right, so what does that look like? And that's amazing. I still remember it to this day. I reached out to a gentleman who I had always thought that I'd go into tech. And a lot of the time that I spend in digital now is applicable. But obviously, like I mentioned, as a mechanical engineer, I never thought I'd be at KFC. And I had actually reached out to folks, moved on from McKinsey, and were doing really interesting things. And I sent a message to this gentleman on LinkedIn who was kind enough to then become a mentor of mine, but he had gone from McKinsey to Google to KFC as well. And I actually asked him, I said, what attracted you to KFC after a very successful career, not at McKinsey and at Google? And the first thing I remember is when I sent this LinkedIn message, he replied within 30 seconds. He's a C-level leader. He was a C-level leader. That meant so much to me because for somebody to go out of their way and take the time to reply, it gives you a lot of motivation to say there are people out there who are really willing to help even at the most senior levels. And that's something that I really appreciate and I hold very dear to my heart. We hopped on a call. We literally hopped on a call and I asked him this question and he said it's a fantastic experience to help shape the future on a truly global scale. So if you think about KFC, 150 countries, 30,000 restaurants, if you think about making an impact across the world, this is a great platform to be able to do it. And not only was his personality, his charm, and obviously he's willing to chat so quickly inspiring to me, but just that notion of truly having a global impact, that was certainly inspiring. And look, it's a privilege to be in a role where you can see the difference that one makes. And so, yeah, what started off as mentorship ended up being an invitation to join the company. And it's been a couple of years now at KFC, and the leaders are continue to be what we like to describe as high performing and very heart led. And the culture is very reminiscent of that. And I feel very lucky to be a part of it.